Hello, my name is Jamie Lenhart, and I want to welcome you back to A Table for One. This week, I got the chance to try something a little bit new for me, and that is rather than doing a online interview, I got to meet with somebody in person, and it was pretty easy because it was my wife, and we live together. So this week, we're going to chat with my wife, Sarah, and if you haven't met her before, she is a licensed counselor, so we actually talk a little bit more about her career and counseling, especially even in a time like this, and just some interesting information along those lines. So we'll get to that in a little bit later. But before we go into our meditation moment, I just want to take just a second to say, I know that this season has been difficult. People are still feeling disconnected, and that's understandable. I do want you to know that the staff at church is actively working and planning and trying to take all the issues in hand to figure out ways to facilitate connection for everyone. It is coming. Be patient. Retain hope. This is not killing church. It is not killing our relationships. It's just something that we have to figure out how to adapt in this season. But also, in that adaptation, I want to encourage you, as I'm learning this too, I want to encourage everyone that is watching, as the church, we are able to find ways to show compassion and care for one another. We don't have to wait for a pastor. We don't have to wait for a ministry lead. You have the ability, I have the ability to make a phone call, to drop a text, and then remember to respond to that text, to pick up coffee and sit 6 feet apart on a park bench and just catch up and chat. There are ways that we can be respectful to others within this public health issue, and at the same time find ways to connect. But it means that instead of being passive and allowing somebody else to plan it for us, we need to figure out how to do it. And I know we can do it because prior to modern history, it was much harder for people to connect, but they still did. So I want to encourage you, reach out to the people in your life that you maybe haven't reached out to very much lately, or that you miss talking to. Give them a call, drop them an email, set up a way to connect because it's good. And I think you'll find that by you taking that ownership, it's even more sweet than just gathering together on a Sunday morning. So there's my little soapbox. I'm going to get off my soapbox now, and we're going to go into our meditation moment. This week, for our meditation moment, I want to read out of the book of Psalms. In Psalms 34, just 3 verses, 17, 18, and 19. And they read, "The righteous cry, and the Lord hears, and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted, and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all." This week, for our meditation moment, what we can hear repeatedly in these 3 verses is God will come through. And I want you to hear that if you are feeling that the troubles are just mounting, God hears your cry. As you voice your pain and frustration and worry and fear, He hears you. And He will come alongside you. He will deliver you. If you are feeling crushed in the worry and just things just keep kicking you as you're down, He is near you in your brokenness. Take heart. And if you just feel that you've been doing the right thing, but you just can't get ahead, He hears you, He sees you, and He will deliver you. We must stay faithful. We must stay hopeful. and hold fast to our faith, because he will deliver us, because he is a faithful and mighty God. So let's take our moment of meditation on the faithfulness of God, that he hears our cries and he will come through for us. We know it. We don't know when, but we know he will. So let's just take a moment and meditate on the faithfulness of God. Now let's transition over to our next segment and the main portion of our time together. And I hope you enjoy the conversation my wife and I had earlier this week. So please enjoy our time of table talk. Well, tonight we have a guest that I am excited to have with us. Mind you, I say that I think every week, but this one's extra special to me. Actually, my wife Sarah is with us, and she is going to share with us a little bit about what she does as far as a career, and also how that interrelates and crosses with her faith and everything. So, my dear, thank you for being with me this week.
My pleasure.
So, in my first in-person interview, I guess first question I have for you is, so you decided to not just take the easy road and be done with school. You went back because you're a glutton for punishment, and you went back and did grad school. And what was the program that you went into?
So I went to George Fox for their counseling program and included not just the individual's work, but also the system's work. So that means families, couples, and child and adolescent studies.
So the whole gamut, all ages type of thing.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you actually started in marketing and advertising. That was your undergrad.
Yes.
What made you decide to shift to something like counseling? Because that's quite a bit different.
So I was maybe not your classic pre-adolescent child and knew at a young age that I did want to be a therapist, around 12 or 13 actually. I also just didn't want to be a 21-year-old therapist talking about people's trauma and their intense life decisions, because I felt like it wasn't probably going to be received very well, particularly when I was younger, could be viewed as younger. And so I intentionally took some time off before going back to school.
So you mean like when we were engaged and somebody thought you were 16?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yep. That would be what I would be referring to.
That was an entertaining moment. Mm-hmm. So now, within these counseling programs, I know you have to do an internship. You have to do a practical side of things while you're still in the program. In that first year, what is maybe one of the standout moments or something that kind of maybe was eye-opening or just memorable through that process in that first year?
Of course there were many, but I think one of them would be each student chooses a client that they work with for their thesis project. And so I had a couple that, I came home one day from session and, we're talking about like eyes being opened, having insight into the fact that, on the one hand, we have a great marriage because I've never thrown a soup tureen at your head. Although,
Thank you. Thank
yes,
you.
And on the other hand, that like for some people, dealing with addiction, with really hard, with poverty, with just hard factors in life, that can be a coping skill. And there's lots of challenges that I was having to learn the practical skills to supplement the academic skills in the moment with people's real lives.
Okay. Now, Within doing counseling, so what was there a specific vein that you were wanting to move into, or was it kind of you just wanted to do a broad spectrum?
So originally, I've always been passionate about marriage and relationships, and so I thought that I would, focus on being a marriage counselor, and that was kind of what originally drew me to the field. But that is not what I do at this stage of the game.
So what changed?
A couple things changed. One of them, I think, is you can have an idea of how something's going to how you're going to work within something, and then the reality can be different. And so in my mind, I had this idea that like couples are going to come in and I'm going to help be like a cycle breaker and help support them in making change through the generations. And I discovered through some pretty painful experiences just that, like, not to speak in too broad of a generalization, but many couples come in and they literally say things like, well, we should have come in 8 years ago. And, you're a last ditch effort. And it's like, I cannot be in that role because, I am not their savior and I need them to be open to change. And sometimes it feels like with couples therapy, people aren't ready to do that. And so I, for my own health, need to not do that full time.
Okay. So now, I know that marriage is you're passionate about. I mean, that even goes along with us doing the young marrieds group and
Sure.
and all that. So how do you still meet that desire or need for you to promote healthy marriage and stuff in this without being able to do what you expected?
Sure. So, I think it's easy to think about if your marriage is struggling, well, we should do couples counseling. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a wonderful idea. However, there's also this element of like personal work as well. So a lot of the work that I do is the more individual work, whether that's a wife or a husband, and they're working on their own choices and how that impacts their relationship. How do their thoughts, how do their feelings, how do their behaviors impact the people in their lives? And I can't. What are you?
No, I'm sorry. I'm laughing because my dog is suddenly jingling everywhere. Has nothing to do with my wife. Yet he's going to jingle a little bit because he has no respect for filming. So please carry.
Yeah. So a lot of it is the individual work that supports the marriage relationship or how that plays through.
Yeah. Now, you're a counselor, and I know that obviously you're a Christian. That's shouldn't be a surprise to anybody in this venue. How do you approach counseling in a situation where I know you don't bill yourself as a Christian counselor, though you have that lens that you operate through? So how do you navigate that with people where it doesn't become a roadblock?
Sure. So I had a professor in grad school recommend not advertising yourself as a Christian counselor because of the fact that it can pigeonhole you in ways that are not positive. And I took that seriously with, no, go on. Go on. So I not only did I take that seriously because I don't want to be in this small category of a Christian counselor, but also because of the fact that ethically you need to be careful about how you live there's very clear rules on ethics and counseling and about prophesizing and evangelizing. And so not only do I feel like it's inappropriate to evangelize clients, but it's also, unethical. So that's why I choose not to bill myself as a Christian counselor.
Okay. How do you handle situations, say that, because of your your faith, because of your belief structure, when you're confronted with a situation that you're working with a client in, that maybe is does or potentially is running contrary to that value system that you have.
Yeah. I mean, so the thing that's so interesting about, I think, generally, like, our culture often, people expect therapists to be judgmental. And ironically, they also often expect the church and a broad generalization to be judgmental as well. So, yes, there's times that clients tell me things that I have my internal reaction to, but it would not be professional nor helpful for them to know that. And so, what I'm trying to do as a therapist is help the individual come to their own conclusion about what is in their best interest and what is healthy for them, healthy choices, doing lots of boundary work, doing lots of work. And so, yes, I literally talk about like health, and I always include how is your physical health going? How is what are we doing with your mental health and symptoms? And we talk about social health, how are your social relationships, community. Often I literally will reference, do you have any faith system integration? And I talk about spiritual health, but I use the word spiritual because I want people to, I want to not pigeonhole people once again using that word, but it's true. And so it's one of those things where you hold it loosely because people need to feel accepted. They're not going to share their lives with you if they feel that you're not a compassionate and receptive audience. And if there's no relationship,
Yeah.
then where are we going from there?
Okay. Now, how would you say your faith has shaped your philosophy in counseling and how you go about it?
I mean, it's hard because of the fact that I literally see the lack of God in clients. And there's times that you would love to be like, hey, what would really be helpful would be Jesus in your life. But once again, can't do that. So it goes back to how do I help support health and hope that they will get there. But the problem is that, if they have a lot of relational trauma with people in their lives, or they're really stressed about, paying the bill or these other things, like they're not going to get to I shouldn't say not, but they're less likely to get to the point where they're taking the time to attune to like their spiritual self because they're like in crisis or survival mode. And so, my faith definitely impacts the way I see people because I can see what's missing in their lives, but it's helping them to also see what's missing in their lives. So it's helping empower them to try to hopefully come to that same reflective piece of saying, okay, what else could be there? What else could be healthier, or what could be lacking?
What advice would you give to someone, any of us in the church, as we know that we are called to be people that come alongside, support people through troubles and through actually trials and tribulations, through those difficult times in life. Do you have any thoughts from the perspective of what you do, of how we can come alongside and potentially, be that person to support them, but at the same time, hopefully bring them closer to faith? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think part of it is a couple of things come to mind. One of them is knowing your limits, where, it's not healthy for anyone to be anyone's end-all be-all. So, I saw it was a meme, to be honest, but it was, what are those called? Like those, the boards outside churches that you can put the letters up on, whatever those are called. And it said something like, Jesus says it's okay to have a therapist and a savior, or something. I wasn't quite like that, but it was something where it was like a church and a therapist. And so like the point there is that like whether we're talking about therapy, whether we're talking about joining into community, into looking into your physical health, into a freaking book group. I don't know. Like it's helping people come to the point of I cannot be anyone's everything, and so if someone is struggling, how do I support them, but also help, but know where my role ends? You know, if they're calling me at 2 a.m., it's one thing if that's, your immediate family member and it's a crisis, but that should not be a sustained activity because that's not healthy for them and it's not healthy for you.
Okay. So establishing some boundaries.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so if I understand then, so it's okay, so you have someone close to you going through difficult things and you want to come alongside them. So the best first thing you can do, understand some good established boundaries.
I think maybe prior to that even is, yes, boundaries, but even maybe prior is, what do people want? They often want to be heard before they want solutions, which sounds easy. And then just come home from work and have your child, your roommate, your significant other ask how your day went, and then tell them something challenging, and then have them try to solve it. Not that we have ever had this happen. And then let me know how that goes, and then you can join my wait list at work. That's the thing. We want to be heard. And so really being aware of if someone's struggling, it's one thing if they say, help me problem solve this. Help me figure out, like, I'm at my wit's ends. Help me do pros and cons, or help me do, I can't figure out solutions. I'm dumbfounded. Okay. But if they just want to be heard, then just trying to listen and not thinking through how all of the things that we tend to do. We tend to jump, myself included. As a therapist, I have to also be aware that I'm not, and try to not do this. I'm not trying to solve your anxiety. I'm trying to hear what your experience is like, and then we can figure out what may or may not be helpful tools within that. But if I don't hear it and there's not rapport built, then we're not going to move forward anyways.
So there's establishing boundaries, but there's also not jumping to solution-based
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
and just being with rather than being their savior.
Being present and not, and just being present and being with. And the thing is, with some things, I think of grief and I think of loss, and there isn't a solution. We don't have solutions to some of these things in life. And so trying to force solutions, even if our heart is in the right place, just causes damage, or if not damage, at least it's just not what we need. We just need to be seen, and we need to be heard, and ideally moving toward understood. But if nothing else, being seen and heard, being seen and heard.
No, that makes sense. So at this juncture, you're doing a lot of individual counseling with people, still supporting marriage in, I guess maybe in a roundabout or behind the scenes way, because you're promoting healthy relationships in general. What would be an encouragement you would have towards anybody watching, as far as if they're kind of right now looking down the barrel going, this is just becoming overwhelming to me, be it what's going on all around us right now or just situations in life, and they're feeling the anxiety rise, they're feeling these things, and it's just they feel like they're starting to drown. What would your recommendation of what they could do at this juncture to help stabilize?
I think that, particularly with the pandemic, it's been very isolating. And so while on the one hand, we're very burnt out on virtual meetings and that sort of a thing, part of it is, how do I still connect? Even if it's a small connection, even if it's a 5-minute phone call or a Marco Polo or a note to someone in my household, or if I am in the workplace, in my workplace, like, it's how do I still find those connections and making those connections meaningful. And with anxiety and feeling anxious, it's, the irony here is often with anxiety, it's because we're worrying about the past, we're worrying about the future. So it's how do I try to be present with the moment, which doesn't often feel good. It doesn't feel comfortable, but nor does the anxiety. So you're not making it worse. You're trying to slow down and also that's another area. It can sound weird, but it's I'm going to put boundaries on my anxiety. I'm going to say, you know what? When I'm between these hours, it's not time for me to be anxious. So I'm going to postpone it. I'm going to say, between 4 and 4:30 on my commute home or during the kids are watching a show, that's the time I'm going to let my mind kind of run free. And then at the end of that time, I'm going to either identify some action steps or call someone as a support person, but I'm going to still put parameters, at least try to, work within this, because sometimes we just feel like if I worry, I'll solve problems and it'll help me, but it doesn't often tend to go that way.
Now, in the journey that you've taken in working in the mental health field and in your progression in life, what through this career and through what you've learned and what you've been experiencing, what do you think is probably the biggest area that God's been teaching you or working in you through this time?
It's hard to say in like a really concrete way. I mean, I do feel like I work with a lot of college students, which I love that demographic. They're so fun differentiating from their families and finding out who they are in the world. But I feel like, I see the need for him and how it's not translating. And so, and it kind of, I guess, and part of it is I see, I grew up in the church. So for me, this is not, I don't know if I'd say it's second nature, but it's like it's pretty well ingrained in there. And a lot of my clients and the people I meet with, that's not part of their story. And so it's like trying to find ways to have faith resonate and connect and resonate and connect to the modern generation. And having them see the value in it, not just, oh, that's a thing that my grandparents did or whatever. And so I think something around that.
Okay. We are. I think we're going to call it. Thank you for chatting with me and all the twists and turns that we've taken. And after we sign off, we won't be going away because we live in the same house. What can I say? Well, thank you, my dear.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. And I want to leave you with one thought, like I do each week. And this one comes out of some of the conversation again, but it's also some subsequent conversations Sarah and I had. And it's because I started to see that there's a commonality between the practices in counseling and what we're called to do as believers. And as believers, we are called to come alongside each other, to bear each other's burdens, to allow the other to lean on and have support in difficult times. And that is the nature of what a counselor does. They come alongside. They don't fix, they support. They sometimes provide their own experience or some insight, but they are not fixing the other person. And we as believers are not called to fix one another. We're called to be supports and allow God to fix within them. So what I want to encourage you with this week is take some time in self-reflective thought and prayer and just say, God, continue to teach me how to be one who listens, not one who solves. One who validates, not one who dismisses. And let's be a people that as we hear of the pain and the suffering of those around us, we move with compassion to support, to encourage, and to ultimately point them back to our loving Savior. So thank you for being with us this week, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week now that summer has finally arrived and we have some warm weather. We will see you next week at A Table for One.